Hello, I'm Edna Kane Williams, Executive Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer at AARP. The time you are investing today to take the course, Becoming a More Inclusive Volunteer, is critical to our overall success. At AARP, we are working to uplift the voices and experiences of all people. As an AARP volunteer, we need your help to embed diversity into our advocacy, education, and outreach work. This training and others like it are examples of our commitment to the concepts of diversity, equity, and inclusion for the 50 plus. As we all work to fulfill AARP's mission to empower people to choose how they live as they age, we must remember that AARP's founder, Dr. Ethel Percy Andrus, saw the power of uniting diverse and inclusive voices to advocate for change. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is everyone's responsibility at AARP. Thank you for taking the time to take this training. It will help you grow your skills at becoming a more inclusive volunteer.
I'm Derek Young, and I want to talk to you about what I call Lighthouse Leadership. As an AARP volunteer, I want you to consider something. When I say leadership, that does not necessarily mean you're some big shot. That does not necessarily mean you have people reporting to you. For me, leadership is a lifestyle. And leadership is not about my position. It's about how I conduct myself, how I treat other people. One way to think about leadership is 4 words. It's how I model the way I think we as a group ought to behave as volunteers, how I teach others the way I think we ought to treat each other or conduct ourselves, how I promote what we do at AARP, and lastly, how I protect those things that we at AARP value. So you get the thought here that leading is more about behaving in a way that protects the organization, that protects your fellow volunteers, that protects your members. Well, what do I mean by lighthouse leadership? Imagine the picture. It's a dark, stormy night. A fishing boat is 10 miles from shore, and they recognize that the waters are so intense that if they don't get to shore soon, they may never make it back. What would they need? What would they call on to make sure that they knew how to manage their vessel in the midst of a crazy storm? A lighthouse. The way I want you to think about yourself as an AARP volunteer, and whether you've been there for a short time or a long time, is I want you to see yourself as a lighthouse. Seeing yourself as a lighthouse means you see yourself as a person other volunteers can what? Rely on. Other volunteers can share their fears and issues with. By seeing yourself as a lighthouse or a leader who sees themselves as a lighthouse, you see yourself as a person that people in the community, when they think about you, they think about AARP as one. Well, in this concept of lighthouse leadership, there are 4 categories that I want you as an individual to begin to think about, and I'm going to suggest that your volunteer team think about when it comes to the need for a lighthouse. The first is that good old-fashioned word, change. You know that old thought around standing at a river and watching it and knowing that what? Every second, that river is changing. Well, my suggestion to you, and again, as an individual volunteer and as a person who's part of a volunteer team, what is your philosophy for what I call mastering change? Notice what I didn't say. I didn't say what's your philosophy for dealing with change. I didn't say that. What's your philosophy for handling change? I didn't say that either. Good words, but the word I want you to think about is, what is your philosophy or what is your approach to mastering change? What I found is, in working with volunteers like yourself, taking the time to think that through, taking the time to discuss that with others is a powerful tool to help you be more inclusive and to deliver more equity throughout your time as a volunteer. We all respond to things differently. We know that. But here, by discussing this with your team, it gives you and your teammates there at AARP a chance to really be what? More proactive when change comes. Let's face it, change can come from many different directions. It could be something that's an AARP directive. It could be something that your state is now requiring that it never required before. It could be something that's going on with one of your volunteers. Change has many different faces. So my first suggestion for you to be an even greater leader, an even greater volunteer, a more inclusive and equitable volunteer, I want you to envision yourself as a lighthouse, and I want you to think about how you best thrive in the face of change. And I want you as a volunteer team to spend some time talking about, how do we want to approach change? That's the first category. It's probably the one you will deal with the most throughout your time as a volunteer. So there's change. The second category I want you to think about is challenge. Challenge. Remember, you're bringing your individual experience, exposure, you're bringing your individual background, skill set to the table every time you show up for AARP. So that's why I'm recommending to try to think about this as an individual, but also think about it as a team. What is our philosophy? There's that word again. What's our approach to challenges that come forth? We're dealing with our state on something that's really sticky. We've got a major donor who is upset with our organization, and we've got to figure out how to respond. Those are challenges, something that I've said for many, many years. If we never had change, if we never had challenges, we wouldn't need leaders, and we wouldn't need leadership. You exist because there is change and challenge. And that's why I said leading is not about a position. It's about a commitment to doing what will work best for your group, for your cause. So as you're sitting there, as you're considering this, I wonder what your philosophy is. How do you view challenges? Now, as you think about how you view challenges, you might have that next opportunity to sit with a group of fellow volunteers to say, hey, what is our approach collectively speaking? I know how I view challenges, but what about you? What about you? What about you? You see, I believe that this proactive way of thinking, this proactive way of communicating will do what? It will so significantly improve your ability to thrive when the change comes, when the challenge hits. You won't have to wonder, how does Sally feel? How does Jose feel? You'll never have to wonder. You already know because you've thought about it individually and you've talked about it collectively. Let me say it this way. One of the things that I have found with the hundreds of groups that I've worked with over the years is that more often than not, we don't really know your approach to something until the reality hits. Why wait for two things as massive and as significant as change and challenge? The third category is chaos. Now, I know with words like this, if you ask 5 people, you might get 5 different answers, and that's fine. That's why I'm suggesting you meet as a group to talk about some of your views in this regard. But when I think about chaos, Chaos is that situation where we don't know how to proceed, or we've never seen things break apart like this before. It's sort of a new level of challenge. It's when things that are set to be done a certain way just aren't happening. When a certain process is totally out of whack. Are you starting to see the value now of taking time to really think through? Well, the fourth one is crisis. That's the most serious and intense of the four. That's when there might be a loss of life. That might be when there's a pandemic, where some event or series of events rock you. What's your mentality when it comes to dealing with a crisis? And more than likely, if you're like most of the clients that I've been fortunate to work with over the years, you have a philosophy, but no one has probably ever asked you what it is. And as such, you've never really maybe put it on paper or formalized it. Well, this is that opportunity. Generally speaking, how does your mind work in the midst of a crisis? Years ago, when I worked for a large company here in the U.S., I was in an area that dealt with our community outreach and our charitable giving. And we had a tragedy where one of our employees died in one of our facilities. Prior to that, my leadership style was to be very highly engaged in conversations with my team on a regular basis, daily basis for that matter. Always interacting with them, always talking with them, always chatting them up, if you will. That was my style. But when this tragedy occurred, I totally shifted. I was very quiet. I didn't say much in our meetings where we discussed what had happened. And you know what did happen? It freaked my team out. They'd never seen me this way. People were sort of in the corners. Is DY okay? What's going on with him? You see, I had never let them know that my approach to a crisis is I want to get really quiet to make sure I hear the perspectives, the fears, the feelings of my team, the people I'm working with. So that normal style of being proactive and communicative, it's just the opposite for me in the midst of something really bad. They didn't know that, so it took them a while to open up and for us as a group to be as effective as we could. My suggestion to you is I want you to take some time, think about you, the individual, your approach, your attitude when it comes to crisis. Discuss it with your group. How will this group of 15 AARP volunteers respond in the event of something like X, something like Y, or something like Z? Come up with examples of things that have happened, maybe in other parts of the country, to groups working with AARP. The point is, when you take the time to discuss and to consider and to ultimately clarify how you as individuals and then how you as a collective group of AARP volunteers like to deal with, master change, master challenges, master chaos, because we all know chaos is coming, just give it some time, and sadly, crises. You know, I'm nearing 60. And something that I found to be very common, not just in the United States, but all over the world, is that I have seen, and I want you to think about this, I have seen crises bring the best out of people. I have seen people who have very significant diversities, very different points of view, very different lifestyles, very different values in the midst of a crisis, put all those things to the side and do what is necessary for the people at hand. I like that about this world. My point is, as AARP volunteers, you have the opportunity to spend some time with each other, talking through, thinking through your collective approach to change, challenge, chaos, and crisis. And I believe in so doing, you will better prepare and equip yourselves to thrive when those things come to pass.